Hi everyone, welcome to Emma, a true infidelity story. I'm excited to share a new story with you. I've always been fascinated by the way colors can transform a face, how a single brush stroke can change someone's entire appearance. That's why I became a makeup artist. My name is Ava, and every day I paint not just faces, but lives, dreams, and sometimes the masks people wear to hide their true selves. My husband Adam, he's different. He sees the world in lines and angles, in the strength of structures and the beauty of design. An architect by trade, he's the steady foundation of our home, the one who sketches out our future with precision and care together. We've created a life that feels like a masterpiece, each moment a brushstroke on our shared canvas. And then there's Archie, our golden retriever, who bounds through our lives like a living, breathing paint splash. His energy, his joy. It's infectious. He's the chaos to our order, the laughter to our love, with Adam's calm demeanor and my vibrant spirit. Archie ties us together, a living testament to the life we've built. Our days are filled with the simple pleasures, cozy dinners where the conversation flows as freely as the wine, weekend hikes, where the world seems to stretch out before us, endless and inviting. There's a warmth in our companionship that feels like the glow of a well-lit room, inviting and comforting. But life, as I've learned it, isn't just about the colors you choose to paint with. It's about the shadows that those colors cast beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life. There's a darkness, a storm brewing, one that I never saw coming. It started subtly, like the first hint of gray in a clear sky. Jacob began to work late, his sketches taking him into the night, his mind consumed with projects that seemed to demand more and more of his time. At first I thought it was just the ebb and flow of his career, the dedication that had always been part of him. But then, there were the missed dinners, the forgotten plans, the distance that seemed to grow between us, not in miles, but in moments. I remember, one evening the house was unusually quiet. Archie was asleep, his head resting on my lap. As I sat on the couch waiting for Adam, the clock ticked, a relentless reminder of time passing. When he finally came home, his eyes were distant, his smile forced. "Sorry, love," he said. I got caught up with work. But there was something in his voice, a note of something unsaid, something hidden. As weeks turned into months, the signs became harder to ignore. The late nights turned into unexplained absences, the warmth of our home cooling with each unanswered question. I started to notice things out of place, small at first, a receipt from a restaurant. We never visited, a strange perfume lingering in the air, a change in the way he looked at me as if he were seeing someone else. My world, once vibrant with the colors of love and laughter, began to fade into shades of doubt and fear. I tried to confront him, to bring back the man I married, but each conversation felt like painting over cracks in a wall, temporary fixes that couldn't hold against the growing storm. The storm wasn't just brewing, it was here, tearing through the fabric of our life. I felt it in the silence that now filled our home, in the cold space where warmth used to reside. I could see it in the way Archie would look at me, his eyes full of concern, as if he too sensed the change. I began to question everything. Every moment of our life together, was it all a facade? Had I been painting over the truth with my own desires, my own dreams of what we were supposed to be? The beauty and art that had always been my refuge now felt like a lie, a mask I had worn to shield myself from the reality of what was happening. And so I found myself at a crossroads, standing before a canvas that was no longer just about beauty, but about truth. What could possibly disrupt such a perfect life? The answer was not just in the shadows, but in the very foundation of our home. In the man I thought I knew, in the life we thought we had built. Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning of uncovering the storm that threatened to wash away everything we had painted together. It was a typical Thursday evening. Adam was working late on a project, and I had just finished a long day at the studio applying makeup for a bridal party. The house was quiet when I returned, except for Archie's excited barks greeting me at the door. I decided to unwind in our private study, a room filled with books, art supplies, and a cozy couch where I often sketched or read. I poured myself a glass of wine, letting the day's stress melt away. Archie, sensing my need for company, followed me into the study, his tail wagging furiously. As I sat down, I noticed how the room's dim lighting cast a serene glow, making everything feel intimate and secluded. I started sketching, but my mind was elsewhere, pondering over the complexities of my relationship with Jacob. We had been drifting apart. Not in a dramatic way, but in the subtle, silent shifts that often go unnoticed until they've grown too wide to bridge easily. In this quiet moment, a secret weighed heavily on my heart. It was something I had never shared with Jacob, a truth I had kept hidden even from myself, until recently. The secret was not about infidelity or betrayal, but something far more personal and profound. It was about my own identity, my own desires, and the life I had envisioned for myself before Jacob and I became us. I had always loved my work as a makeup artist, the transformation of faces, the creation of beauty from the mundane. But there was another passion, one I had buried deep beneath the layers of our shared life. I had dreams of painting not just faces, but canvases of expressing my soul through art, in ways that makeup could never fully capture. This secret. This unfulfilled dream had been whispering to me, growing louder with each passing day, especially as Jacob's attention seemed to drift further away. The wine glass felt cold in my hand, the condensation a stark contrast to the warmth of the room I looked at. The sketch. I had begun a portrait of Jacob, but it felt incomplete, just like our life together. Now I set the glass down my fingers, tracing the lines of his face on the paper. There was a time when I would have known every line, every shadow, but now it felt like I was drawing a stranger. Archie, ever perceptive, nudged my hand with his nose, pulling me back from my thoughts. His eyes, so full of love and loyalty, seemed to ask if I was okay. I smiled at him, scratching behind his ears, grateful for his silent companionship. In his presence, I could almost forget the storm brewing outside our little sanctuary, but the silence of the room was suddenly broken by the sound of the front door opening. Jacob was home. His footsteps echoed through the house, a familiar sound that now carried an unfamiliar weight. I heard him pause, perhaps noticing the light from the study, and then his steps approached. He appeared in the doorway, his face tired, his eyes scanning the room before settling on me. "Hey," he said, his voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and something else. Something I couldn't quite place. "Hey," I replied, my voice softer than I intended. There was a moment of silence, the kind that used to be filled with shared laughter or quiet intimacy. But now it was just empty. Jacob moved to sit beside me on the couch, his body close, but his mind elsewhere. "I'm sorry I've been so distant. Lately," he started his words. "Careful, measured work has been overwhelming." I nodded, not trusting my voice. I wanted to tell him about my secret, about the dreams I had shelved for the sake of our life together, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I asked, "Is everything okay with the project?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's more than just the project, Ava. There's something else I've been dealing with." My heart skipped a beat. Was this the moment? Would he share his own secrets, his own burdens? But he didn't continue. He just looked at me, his eyes searching mine for understanding, for something he couldn't find within himself. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in with a weight of unspoken truths. I took his hand, feeling the roughness of his fingers, the hands that had built our home, our life. "Adam, whatever it is, we can face it together," I whispered, hoping my voice carried the strength I felt was slipping away. He squeezed my hand, a gesture that once would have reassured me, but now it felt like a promise he might not keep. "I know, Ava. I just need some time to sort things out." And there it was, the chasm between us, not just in his words, but in the silence that followed. I turned back to my sketch, the lines of his face now blurred by my unshed tears. Archie, sensing the shift in mood, lay his head on my lap, his warmth a small comfort in the growing cold. As Jacob left the room, I was left with my secret, my dreams, and the realization that our life, our masterpiece, might need more than just a touch-up. It might need a complete reimagining. And as I sat there with the wine glass now empty, I knew that the storm wasn't just outside. It was within me, within us, waiting to be unleashed or subdued. What secret does Ava harbor in this quiet moment? Keep listening, asterisk, asterisk. The wine had loosened my thoughts, and as I sat there, my mind wandered into forbidden territories. I began to feel an unusual warmth, a mix of loneliness, and a strange, burgeoning desire. Archie, ever attentive, lay beside me, his head on my lap. In a moment of vulnerability and confusion, I did something I never thought I would. I crossed a line that was not just blurred but obliterated. The aftermath was immediate, a wave of guilt, shock and self-loathing crashed over me. I sat there, staring at Archie, who looked back with innocent, uncomprehending eyes. The reality of what had just happened hit me like a ton of bricks. How could I have let this happen? How could I face Jacob or even myself? After this, I felt the room spin. The walls closing in, my breath came in short, sharp gasps as I tried to process the enormity of my actions. Archie, sensing my distress, whimpered softly, his tail no longer wagging. I pushed him gently away, needing space to think, to breathe. I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked to the window. The night outside was dark, the moon hidden behind clouds mirroring the turmoil inside me. I leaned against the cool glass, trying to ground myself in the reality of the moment, but the reality was too much to bear. I couldn't stay in this room, not with the weight of what I'd done hanging over me. I needed to escape, to find some semblance of peace, or at least solitude to confront my own demons. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and left the house, leaving Archie behind with a look of confusion and hurt. Driving aimlessly, I found myself at the edge of town, where the city lights gave way to the darkness of the countryside. I parked the car and walked into the night, the chill air biting at my cheeks. My thoughts were a whirlwind, each one more damning than the last. How could I have let my loneliness, my unfulfilled desires lead me to this? Was I so starved for affection, for connection, that I would seek it in the most inappropriate of places? The thought of Jacob, his face, when he would eventually learn of this, made my heart clench painfully. I walked until my feet ached, until the cold seeped into my bones, hoping the physical pain would numb the emotional agony. But it didn't. Instead, it sharpened my resolve. I knew I had to confront this, not just for Jacob, but for myself. I couldn't let this moment define me, define us. Turning back, I drove home with a heavy heart. The house was dark when I returned, Adam still at work, or perhaps somewhere else dealing with his own secrets. I entered quietly, not wanting to disturb the silence that now felt like a barrier between us. Archie greeted me at the door, his tail wagging tentatively, his eyes searching mine for some sign of the person he knew. I knelt down, pulling him close, whispering apologies into his fur, seeking forgiveness from the one creature who had no part in my human failings. I went to our bedroom, the bed cold and empty. I sat on the edge, my mind racing. I had to tell Jacob, not just because he deserved the truth, but because I needed to reclaim some part of my integrity. But how? How do you tell the man you love that you've crossed an unspeakable boundary? The clock on the nightstand ticked away the minutes, each one feeling like an eternity. I knew I couldn't wait for him to come home. I had to leave a note, something to explain, to begin the conversation we needed to have. I found a piece of paper, my hand trembling as I wrote. Adam, I've done something that has shaken me to my core. I need to talk to you to explain, please. When you read this, know that I am sorry and I need us to find a way through this together. Ava. I placed the note on his pillow, my heart heavy with dread and hope. Dread for the pain I would cause, hope that we could somehow mend what I had broken. As I lay down, not to sleep but to wait, I realized the storm wasn't just outside or within our home. It was within me, a tempest of guilt, desire, and the desperate need for redemption. The night stretched on, and with each passing moment, I felt the weight of my actions, the gravity of the confession I would have to make, in the uncertain path ahead. What will Ava do next? The answer might shock you. Asterisk. The next morning the house was silent. Jacob had left early for work, unaware of the turmoil within me. I couldn't bring myself to look at Archie, who seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere. His tail didn't wag with its usual enthusiasm, and his eyes followed me with a kind of solemn understanding. I went through the motions of my day, but my mind was a whirlwind of guilt and confusion. The weight of last night's actions pressed down on me like a physical force, making each step feel heavier than the last. I considered confessing to Jacob, but the thought was paralyzing. How could I explain the unexplainable? How could I tell him that in a moment of weakness I had crossed a line that was not just blurred but obliterated? The very idea made my stomach churn and I felt the bile rise in my throat. I needed to find a way to cope, to process before I could even think of confronting him with the truth. I decided to seek solace in my work, hoping the routine would provide some semblance of normalcy. At the studio, I was applying makeup for a client, but my hands shook and my focus was elsewhere. My colleague, noticing my distress, asked if everything was okay. I nearly broke down but managed a weak smile, saying I was just tired. The day dragged on, each minute stretching into an eternity. My thoughts were a tangled mess of what ifs and should haves. I replayed the moment in my mind, the moment of weakness, the moment I betrayed not just Jacob but myself. The guilt was overwhelming, a constant companion that whispered accusations in my ear. As the afternoon light began to fade, I found myself alone in the studio, the last client having left. The silence was deafening, and I couldn't escape the echo of my own thoughts. I sat down at my makeup table, staring at my reflection. The face looking back at me was not the vibrant, confident woman I knew. It was someone haunted, someone lost. I picked up my brush, the one I used to blend shadows, and instead of applying it to a client, I began to sketch on a piece of paper. The strokes were erratic, the lines jagged. I was trying to capture the storm inside me, the tempest of emotions that threatened to consume me. The sketch was a mess, a chaotic representation of my inner turmoil. But as I looked at it, something clicked. This was not just about my mistake. It was about the life I had been living, the dreams I had shelved, the identity I had suppressed. The storm wasn't just about last night. It was about years of unfulfilled desires, of living for someone else's vision of happiness. I needed to confront not just what I had done, but who I had become. I needed to find a way to reconcile my desires with the life I had built with Jacob. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. Could I still be the woman Jacob fell in love with while also being true to myself? The studio door opened and my colleague ped in. Ava, are you sure you're all right? You've been here for hours. I nodded, forcing another smile. I just needed some time to think. I'll be fine. She hesitated, then left, closing the door softly behind her. I looked back at the sketch, the chaotic lines now seeming to form a path, a way forward. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to paint over this mistake, not to hide it, but to transform it into something new, something honest. I packed on my things, my mind made up. I would talk to Jacob not just about last night, but about everything, about my dreams, my fears, and the life we could still build together if he could forgive me, if we could both find a way to forgive ourselves. Driving home, the city lights blurred into streaks of color, much like the tears that now streamed down my face. I wasn't just crying for the guilt. I was crying for the hope of redemption, for the possibility of a new beginning. When I arrived, the house was still quiet, the note I had left still on Adam's pillow. I took a deep breath, studying myself. This was it. This was the moment where I would either lose everything or find a new way to love, to live, to be. I sat on our bed, the note in my hand, waiting for Jacob. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was filled with the potential of words yet to be spoken, of truths yet to be shared. I knew the storm was far from over, but for the first time in a long while I felt ready to face it, to weather it with Jacob by my side. If he would have me, will Ava's secret remain hidden, or will it come to light? Find out next. Asterisk. The day dragged on, and by evening I couldn't bear the weight of my secret any longer. Jacob came home, his usual cheerful self, talking about his day. I watched him, my heart heavy with the burden of my actions. As he prepared dinner, I found myself standing in the doorway of the kitchen, the words forming in my throat. Jacob, there's something I need to tell you. I started, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned, concern etching his features. I took a deep breath and the words tumbled out. A confession of my infidelity, not with another man, but with Archie. The silence that followed was deafening. Stehan's face went from confusion to shock, then to a pain I had never seen before. He dropped the spatula he was holding, the clatter echoing through the kitchen like a gunshot. His eyes, usually so full of warmth, now searched mine for some sign that this was a cruel jest. But there was no jest here, only the harsh truth I had just laid bare. Ava, what are you saying? His voice was a mix of disbelief and hurt, his hands trembling slightly as he steadied himself against the counter. I made a terrible mistake. Jacob. I was feeling so alone, so lost in my own thoughts and desires. It was a moment of weakness, a moment where I lost myself. My voice broke, tears streaming down my face, each one a testament to the gravity of my confession. Adam's face contorted, the pain visible as if I had physically struck him. He stepped back, his body language screaming, "Retreat! How could you with Archie?" His voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a scream. I know it's wrong. I can't even begin to explain why or how it happened. It was a moment of confusion, of misplaced affection. I'm so sorry, Jacob. I've never felt more ashamed. He turned away his shoulders, slumped his back to me as if he couldn't bear to look at me. The silence stretched, filled only with the soft, confused whimpers from Archie, who lay in the corner, his tail no longer wagging. I need some time. Jacob finally said, his voice hollow. I need to think. I nodded, my throat tight, words failing me. He walked out of the kitchen, his steps heavy, each one a reminder of the distance now between us. I stood there, feeling the room close and around me, the walls painted with the vibrant colors of our life, now fading into a dull gray canvas of regret. The evening light faded, and I found myself alone in the study, the room where my secret had festered, where my desires had whispered to me in the quiet. I sat on the couch, Archie beside me, his head resting on my lap, his eyes full of a sorrow I couldn't bear to meet. I picked up my sketchbook, flipping through the pages filled with faces, with dreams, with the life I had painted for others. But now my own life felt like a sketch, left unfinished, the lines blurred, the colors muddled. I began to draw, not Jacob's face, but the storm inside me, the tempest of guilt, desire, and the desperate need for redemption. As I sketched, my thoughts were a whirlwind. How could I have let my loneliness, my unfulfilled desires lead me to this? Was I so starved for affection, for connection, that I would seek it in the most inappropriate of places? The thought of Jacob, his face, when he would eventually learn of this, made my heart clench painfully. I knew I had to confront this, not just for Jacob, but for myself. I couldn't let this moment define me, define us. I needed to reclaim some part of my integrity, to find a way to reconcile my desires with the life I had built with Jacob. The door creaked open and Jacob stood there, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Ava, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady but distant. I set down my sketchbook, my heart pounding in my C******T. "Yes, we do," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He sat across from me, the space between us feeling like a chasm. "I've been thinking," he began, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I've been so caught up in my work, in my own world, that I didn't see you slipping away. I didn't see how much you needed me." His words were like a bomb, yet they couldn't erase the pain I had caused Jacob. Let me finish," he interrupted, his eyes finally meeting mine. "I'm Nico deeply, but I also know that we've both been lost in our own ways. Maybe, just maybe, we can find our way back to each other." A flicker of hope sparked within me, but it was tempered by the reality of my actions. "I want to make things right, Jacob. I want to be honest about everything, about my dreams, my fears, and yes, about my mistakes." He nodded slowly, his expression softening. "We've built something beautiful together, Ava, but maybe it's time we paint over some of the cracks, not to hide them, but to make our foundation stronger." The room felt less oppressive. Now the weight of my secret shared the burden, now a shared load. "I want to paint again, Adam, not just faces, but canvases. I want to explore my art, my identity with you by my side." Jacob reached out his hand, finding mine the warmth, a stark contrast to the cold fear that had gripped me. "Then let's do it together. Let's rebuild. Let's rediscover, and let's heal." The storm was still there, within me, within us, but now it felt like a storm we could weather together. As we sat there, hands clasped, the night outside, dark and foreboding, I felt a new resolve. We had a lot to work through, a lot to forgive, but for the first time in a long while, I felt we could face it together. What will Adam's reaction be? The answer will leave you speechless. Adam's reaction was not what I expected. Instead of anger, there was a profound sadness. He sat down, his head in his hands, processing the unimaginable. We talked, or rather I talked, explaining my confusion, my loneliness, and the inexplicable moment of weakness. He listened, his silence speaking volumes. In the days that followed, our life together changed. Jacob moved out, needing space to think, to heal. Archie, sensing the shift, became more subdued. I was left in a house alone with my thoughts, and the echoes of what once was therapy became my refuge. A place to untangle the mess of emotions and understand my actions. The story of our marriage didn't end. It transformed Jacob, and I found a new way to relate, not as husband and wife, but as three people who had shared a significant part of their lives. Now navigating the aftermath of a storm, Archie remained with me, a reminder of my darkest moment yet, also of the unconditional love that pets offer. No matter the circumstances, I threw myself into my art, painting, not just for clients but for myself. Each stroke on the canvas was a step towards reclaiming my identity, my desires, and my integrity. The studio, once a place of routine, became my sanctuary where I could express the turmoil and the healing process. My colleagues noticed the change, the intensity in my work, the depth in my creations. They asked questions, but I wasn't ready to share the full story, only that I was going through a personal transformation. Adam and I met occasionally in neutral places, coffee shops, parks, places that held no memories of our past life. Together, these meetings were awkward at first, filled with the weight of unspoken words, but slowly they became a space for honest conversation. We talked about our dreams, our regrets, and the future we could still envision, albeit separately. During one of these meetings, Adam shared that he had started seeing someone, a colleague from work. The news stung, but it was a necessary pain, a reminder that life moves on, that we both needed to find happiness in new ways. He looked at me, searching for a reaction, and I managed a small, genuine smile. "I want you to be happy, Jacob," I said, and I meant it. Our talks became less about the past and more about the present and future. We discussed art, architecture, life, and sometimes Adam would ask about him and I'd share stories of his antics, his loyalty, and how he was helping me heal. It was in these moments that I realized the depth of our connection hadn't vanished. It had simply evolved. I began to explore new avenues in my art, experimenting with different mediums, colors, and themes. My work started to reflect not just my inner turmoil, but also the journey towards redemption and self-discovery. An art gallery owner, intrigued by my evolving style, offered me a solo exhibition. The prospect was terrifying yet exhilarating. Preparing for the exhibition, I poured my soul into every piece. Each painting was a chapter of my story, from the vibrant colors of our past life to the darker, more introspective shades of my recent experiences. The night of the opening, Jacob came. He stood before each canvas, his eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. When he reached the last piece, a self-portrait with Archie, he turned to me, his eyes moist. "This is beautiful, Ava. You've captured so much," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Jacob," I replied, feeling a sense of closure and a new beginning. The exhibition was a success, not just in terms of sales, but in the personal validation it brought me. People connected with my art saw the pain, the hope, and the transformation. It was a testament to the power of facing one's darkest moments and turning them into something meaningful. After the exhibition, life took on a new rhythm. I continued my therapy, now focusing on building a life that was true to my desires and dreams. I started teaching art classes, sharing my journey with others, hoping to inspire them to find their own paths of healing and self-expression. Jacob and I kept in touch, our relationship, now one of mutual respect and understanding. We even collaborated on a project blending architecture with art, a fusion of our worlds that felt right. Archie, ever the bridge between us, would visit. Jacob occasionally, a symbol of the bond we still shared, albeit in a different form. As I sat in my studio one evening, the light casting long shadows over my latest work, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape altered but fertile, ready for new growth. I looked at Archie, now older but still as loving, and whispered, "We made it through, didn't we, boy?" And in that moment, surrounded by the colors of my life, I knew that while the masterpiece of our marriage might have changed, the canvas of my life was still vibrant, still evolving, still full of potential. How will Ava rebuild her life after such a revelation? Tune in to find out. Asterisk. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks.